This build can dish out incredible amounts of damage. As you can see here. Floop. Hey everybody, it's Rob here. Welcome to what I believe is the overall best Spiritborn build of Season 6. It's very decent for leveling and early game, and it scales up, as you can see here, like crazy in the end game, hitting for up to 1 billion damage per feather, and we have many of these feathers. This build has good AoE, great single target, and has a very good durability at the same time of doing like a tremendous amount of damage. Here we have 10k life, 10k barrier, and that is a ton of stuff here in the current version of the game. You can do any kind of content with this. You can do Torment 4, hardest difficulty. You can do Pit 100s with ease. I was pushing this up to Pit 110. And there is some gameplay here. And the gameplay is actually pretty simple. Like you basically just keeping some of your skills here on cooldown and then using Quill Volley to absolutely decimate your enemies. And big shout out here to Ace of Spades, who has been spearheading a lot of the Spiritborn theory crafting and shared loads of amazing tips with me. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description, so definitely check that out. And you guys can see here, we are basically maintaining perma unstoppable here with our armored hide. This is like thanks to our key passive that we'll talk about here in a second. We'll basically cover all the details, all the Paragon, all the skill tree, all the mercenary, all the endgame stuff, gameplay strategies, everything in this build here. And you guys can kind of see here like how we basically completely decimate these. I had to turn off the damage numbers because it's just so many numbers. We are proccing 16 feathers every attack, and this build just goes crazy. So let's jump back into the game here. So this is basically our main skill that we use here. It's called Quill Volley. It doesn't cost any vigor because we use the Rod of Kapeleke that basically allows it to become a basic skill and spend all of our resources, and we gain those resources back very easily here. But basically you can just spam Q like you're just... If you have the build properly set up, you can basically just spam this without having to worry about it so much. And this is basically the main DPS skill. And you can see from range, we're not doing all too much damage. We're doing our most damage if we actually go close to the enemy. So we can basically just run around and spam the skill, and other things will happen automatically. Then we have Armored Hide. This one gives us a resolve stacks. It's this icon here, which gives us 20% damage reduction, and with our Colossal Glyph also gives us a damage multiplier. Very strong. Then we have Revenger here, which basically gives us extra resource generation. Our vigor goes up like crazy with this one, and the duration is extended whenever we kill stuff. So we're gonna basically have this up permanently. And also your core skills, which Quill Volley is, when I have this active, will actually dash to the target. You can see it's like automatically going into range. So even if I go from a bit further, let me reset it real quick so we can just attack and reset. So if I cast it from a bit further and now I press Q, it's going to walk and then it's going to cast a skill. You can kind of see this here. Walk, and then it's going to automatically cast a skill once you're in range. So Ravager is really strong. Then we're using the Hunter. This one we can reset very easy. It overfills our Ferocity. Ferocity is this thing. It gives us attack speed, and Ferocity also gives us a multiplier here together with our Furnace, where we get 1.5x crit damage per stack of Ferocity. And our Hunter basically overflows our Ferocity by 4. So we get higher amounts of Ferocity stacks. We also get the attack speed cap. Then we're using Scourge here. This one is to lifesteal, and it also does about 1.5x damage to crowd controlled enemies. I just noticed I have even the wrong rune here. So we are using the lifesteal rune usually when we do runs, because it basically gives us life back for the damage that we have done, and it gives us another 1.5x to crowd controlled enemies, which we will do all the time. Like Scourge itself is fearing the enemy. Obviously it won't work here, but it usually fears the enemies, and this also counts as a crowd control. And then last skill on the bar is basically Vortex. This allows us, we have one of the vortex sized temperers, allows us to pixel pool enemies together and then just blast them with our feathers. So we're basically doing the most damage. You guys can see like kind of the pattern on these feathers, and we're doing the most damage like right at the center here. So like this It's not that much damage, but once we go on the target, like all the feathers hit the target, and they hit the target twice, and that's when we deal the lion's share of our damage, basically. So now we go over the gear, and then we go over the skill tree. So we have Harmony. This one allows us to gain even more tags on all our skills and gain another damage multiplier. So you notice here, my Quill Volley is baseline is an Eagle skill. Then we get with our Spirit Hall, we also get the Gorilla tag. And with the Harmony, we also get the Jaguar tag. So we have triple tag on the skill. And that also means that our skill will do 90% X DPS. That's very strong. And it also makes a lot of passives and a lot of Paragon glyphs affect this skill in terms of multipliers, in terms of other effects that we can proc. And what makes Quill Volley this strong is the second rune upgrade here, which basically allows Quill Volley, whenever it hits the same target, to do an additional 10% damage. And we are hitting the target with a bunch of feathers, basically further increasing our damage like crazy here with the upgrade Advantage Quill Volley here. So yeah, the helm is very strong. Ideally, you want to masterwork the damage reduction here fully. Movement speed is also decent at the start because it gives us damage multiplier with our passives. We're going to go over that in a bit. And then I think for most players, I actually recommend you guys play with a Tyrell's Might. This is the only uber unique that you can realistically want to use in this build. Like again, you can play with all uber uniques if you want to play like an offensive chest, but then you need to solve your all res in some ways. So I think Tyrell's Might is overall the best. Alternatively, you can also play with Shroud of False Death. However, this is going to be a very, very squishy setup. So you can use Juggernaut here, you can use Might, depending on what you want, or you use the Tyrell's Might, which is what I recommend because it basically maxes out our res even in Torment 4. Then on the gloves here, now ideally you want, instead of core, you want Quill Volley, because Quill Volley is a core skill. I just haven't found it with Great Harfix, so I have a +5 to core skills. That works as well. We have Vortex Size for a bigger pull here. And then we are using basic skill damage because with the Kepelecke, our Quill Volley becomes a basic skill as well, unlocking either more multipliers, and the basic skill damage is obviously the highest value that you can get in the additive category. Then on the Pensive, using Disobedience, we are basically scaling our armor very high. So the more armor we have, the more DPS we do, thanks to the unyielding hit aspect here on the amulet. Again, we have the planner here in the description. You can also see like how it's hitting for billions of damage per feather, and there's 16 feathers, and they also return. So it's like 32 billion DPS, if you will, at least on injured targets. And this is the planner here. I'm going to link that below. You can follow along right there. So we want Disobedience here. We are rocking Resolve stacks. We're rocking Barrier Generation, because the more barrier that we have with one of our Paragon nodes that we're going to talk about in a bit, the more DPS we'll do. So you basically want to have, ideally, as much barrier as you have life. So you see here I have 7k barrier and I have 7k life when I'm fully maxed. And that's why we also use the Bulwark from the Druid, because it gives us more defense and more offense. It's this Paragon node here that basically allows us to scale damage based on how much barrier we have. Right here, Vicious Shield, so we get up to 33% X damage for every maximum life we have as a barrier. So very strong. And they're even buffing the Pork Rune here, so we are going to be spending resources all the time with Kepelecke. So we basically like generate and spend our resource, like see every time, like when I hit, I spend and I regain my resources like in an instant, like every time. So we basically proc this rune like crazy. You can see here how it goes up. And they're even buffing this rune, so it's going to be even easier to trigger those bulwarks. You can also use armor percent here. It's very close between maximum resolve stacks and armor percent, because the maximum resolve stacks, we have a colossal glyph here in our Paragon that basically gives us here a 2% damage multiplier for each stack of resolve that we have. So it's very close between armor percent for the gorilla scaling or resolve stacks. So I find it best to have one resolve stack temper and one armor percent temper. That's how I've been playing. Then on the boots here, we increase our ferocity. Again, ferocity gives us attack speed. We want to reach 100%, so you guys can see here in my stats. Once I overflow the ferocity here with my hunter, which gives me 4 extra ferocity stacks, and we actually find the attack speed category here, you will see that the attack speed bonus boom goes up to 100%. And down here you can see we have 14 ferocity stacks, increasing our attack speed and increasing our DPS multiplicatively with the furnace here. So that's another like 1.2x multiplier. And then obviously you want some movement speed. The reason you want movement speed is this brilliance here, which basically gives us a 9% multiplicative damage of our movement speed bonus. So right now you can see here per point, we are basically getting 6% damage per point. So very strong for one passive point. Then we have the weapon here that basically enables the build. Again, you can also play it without it, but this is a crazy multiplier. And this basically makes us spend all our resources for guaranteed crits, and for every point of vigor that we have, we gain more DPS as well. And this is a 3% X. So if we have 100 resources, we would gain 300% damage, and we have 220. So we gain over 600, almost 700% damage here if you have really good gear from the Kepeleke. And keep in mind, all this footage that you see here was me not even having, you know, an ancestral version, because it's very hard to find. It was bugged on this version, but it's been confirmed in a dev campfire stream that you can target farm this staff at Duriel and Endariel. So that's where you can get it. And ideally you want to masterwork the chance for core skills to hit twice. It's basically double damage. For the quill volley, like even more hits, and the maximum resource is also a pretty decent one, because again, maximum resource here scales our DPS like crazy. So basically our core skills are becoming basic skills like this, and this allows us to get multipliers such as Moonrise, boosting our basic skills, thus boosting our core skills with Kepeleke. And we can essentially make back this entire vigor that we spent, because usually let me take this off. We will just spend all our vigor and then we have nothing left, right? But there is a ring here to solve that problem. And it has a very good synergy. It's called Midnight Sun. And this ring has a crazy synergy with Kepeleke, because Kepeleke will give us guaranteed crits. And whenever we crit, we regain 50% of the vigor we have spent in the last 2 seconds. And we have a lot of attack speed. So once we have Revenger and a little bit of resource generation, you will see what happens here. I activate this, and it's going to be permanently up. I activate this, and then I just attack. And you see my resource, like, it's very hard to see, but it basically fills and gets spent in an instance all the time. So we basically spend and generate the resources like all the time instantly. You see, like, it's flickering a little bit. So this is the way it works. We have guaranteed 100% crit chance, and whenever we crit, we gain vigor back, which we then boost by our resource generation multiplication. So that is very strong. And the same thing for the ring. It also gives us the counter attacks passive effect. If you read counter attack, this is the passive effect here. And there's also a rune here for reinforced counter attack, which basically allows our crit damage to go up by 1.3x if we have enough close enemies around us. And this is definitely the case. So we get a ton of more, basically a 1.3x damage multiplier on top of solving all our resource needs here. And I think you want to masterwork either the cooldown or the dexterity. Right now my cooldown is kind of fine because we're using a key passive. I'm going to go talk about that when we talk about the skill tree. And yeah, then we already talked about Moonrise here, attack speed. You need max life because Kepeleke doesn't have max life, and it's very important to have quite some max life to not die. If you're starting out, I could see people die because they have a very low life pool. You want to have a minimum of like 4k life. Better like me here, 7k life. And that's very nice. And then on the amulet here, there's a big change. You want a greater affix armor roll, ideally. I don't even have this, so it would be much better if I have percent armor as the greater affix, because again, casting a gorilla skill, and again, our quill volley becomes a gorilla skill thanks to our spirit hall. All skills are now also gorilla skills. And this basically allows us to increase our attack speed or attack power by a tremendous amount. You see when we just attack here, our attack power goes up by the amount of armor that we have, 45% of that if you have a perfect aspect. So very, very strong, very crazy synergy, big DPS. I think this is in fact one of the biggest multipliers in the game, and we are combining this here with Disobedience, and you can also combine it with Juggernaut. You can see like the absolute crazy amounts of armor that we can reach despite the Torment multiplier that you even have to add on this. So right now we basically have a 10,600 armor here, which is scaling our damage, and 10,000 armor would increase our damage, our weapon damage, by 4,500. So you see a normal weapon only has like 500 damage. So this one basically like times 7 times 8x's our damage once we have this much armor. And again, I don't even have, you know, the crazy greater affix triple crit armor amulet that you can get in theory. So you can have probably like up to maybe 15k armor if you have like really perfect gear. We'll see how high it's gonna go, but definitely a lot of armor, and that's also the reason why we use skulls everywhere. Then on the chests here and on the helm, I'm using diamonds. This is to reach the Paragon board minimum requirements. I'll show this to you once we talk about the Paragon board. All right, next we're talking about the Spirit Horse. So again, we're using the Gorilla here for extra barrier and also to gain the Gorilla status effects or skill tags on our Quill Volley. We're also using Ferocity here, Jaguar, to increase our Ferocity stacks, and we also gain a lot of Ferocity stacks. On top of this, this also makes all our skills, thanks to Harmony, also into Jaguar skills. And now let's go to the skill tree. So you just want 2 points in any of the basic skills, and then we want to have maximum Quill Volley with the advantageous rule, increasing our DPS significantly. We want 3 points in follow through, 3 points in vigorous, and 3 points in balanced exertion, all giving us DPS multipliers. Then, since we don't have Shaco, we need 1 point in vortex. It's not really worth it, I think, to take any of the runes, so we're better off taking these skill points in additional multipliers with the passives. Then 1 point in vocal point, 3 points in apex, and then it depends here. Right now I have only 2 points in diminishment. You can also max this if you need more toughness. However, I already felt like I was very, very tanky, even in pit 100. Then we have Ravager here again to get ferocity and to get resources here with the measured Ravager for the dashing and for the resource generation. This is a very cool skill. Just allows us to basically dash to the target all the time. Then coming down here, we want to max Perseverance. We have a lot of Resolve stacks. And if you need more toughness, it's very easy to temper more Resolve stacks. So right now, you can see if I press my Armored Height, I basically have 12 Resolve stacks. And that's going to give us 12 times 1.5% damage reduction. That's 18% damage reduction. And if you're stacking more Resolve, you have more damage reduction. Then I really like to put 5 or at least 3 points in Armored Height. And the reason for this is the passive effect. You can see here, gain 2 Resolve stacks every 5 seconds. And if I take this off, it's only 1 Resolve stack every 5 seconds. So you definitely want to have this on rank 5. And you can put 5 skill points, or you can put 3 skill points and then get it with Prodigy's tempo. However, I really like to have this just always up, no matter what, if I proc it or not. So 5 points here, and then again, reinforced Armored Height gives us up to 20% block damage reduction. And we are basically blocking attacks. We have 40% block based on our Rod of Kepeleke. And if it was Ancestral, it would be even 45%. So we're basically blocking every second attack already, and then with Armored Height we also gain 100% block chance. So we basically block and reduce every attack DPS that is incoming. Then we already talked about counteroffensive. Again, our ring gives us the effect Midnight Sun, so we don't need it on the bar, and we're still going to get up to 1.3x multiplier. We use Scourge. Scourge does 2 things. It gives DPS 1.5x against crowd-controlled enemies, and we also have Adaptability Scourge, which basically gives us lifesteal and allows us to regenerate health. Very, very good. And you gotta be a bit careful when you're casting Scourge, like right after you can, for example, cast Vortex, because Scourge can fear the enemies, and this can be really annoying if you can't really play around it very well. So you just gotta get used to it a little bit. Then we put 1 point in Resilience. Again, if you want more toughness, you can also put more points. You don't need to max Dominant, for example. You could do this. 1 point more here, 1 more point here, depending on if you want toughness, but I like to go full DPS. So I'm using Dominant here, 1.15x against knockdown targets with Gorilla skills, and again, everything is a Gorilla skill that we have thanks to our Spirit Hall. And you also have this 5% chance to execute non-bosses, so this basically works in every monster. You have a chance, no matter what, in pit 150 to instantly kill a pack, 5% chance. And also do big multiplicative damage to knockdown targets. Again, there's a Paragon node here that has a 30% chance to knock down vulnerable enemies, and our Quill Volley always makes enemies vulnerable. So we basically have this vulnerable and chance all the time. However, we don't knock down everything, but on the bosses, when it's staggered, we're also getting this multiplier. Again, this is the weakest passive though that we have at the moment in terms of DPS. So again, you can choose to max diminishment, or you can choose to max more 10% life here with resilient if you don't need this damage. And then I have 3 points in brilliance here, again, big multiplier. And if I'm just standing here, I already know that I have 200% movement speed ready. So you can see if I would remove my Tyrell's Might, which gives me another 30%. I even have 10% over cap right now, because unfortunately I hit the movement speed here. So you don't even need greater affix on the movement speed at all. I don't have greater affix on the boots either. So you just want to make sure you have 200% movement speed. And if you don't have it, it might be worth to put 1 or 2 points in acceleration to increase your movement speed even further. However, the multiplier 10% X might sound strong, but it doesn't work, because it only works for 1 Eagle skill after we evade. So it would only be for the first Quill Volley, and we want to be really like spamming it. So there's no point in evading all the time and just casting 1 skill. Like it's not worth it even for this multiplier. So we don't put any points in acceleration if you already have 200% movement speed. Then 3 points in potent. Again, we're hitting enemies with Jaguar skills all the time thanks to our Spirit Hall. We have the Jaguar attack. And our Jaguar here is also producing a lot of damage when he's like attacking these guys, and we're doing a lot of attacks anyways. So we are stacking this up a very fast 1.3x, and it's also the strongest passive. I have follow through right now because I ran out of resources. It was very hard to get resources in this client, but if you have more resources available than me, you can definitely roll this to either potent is good, brilliance is good on the amulet. You can run follow through like I have right now, but yeah. Many options. And then Furnace is also a very strong passive. Again, right now we have 14 ferocity stacks. So we are basically getting another 21 multiplier here from Furnace. Then we are rocking 3 points in resolution. So this is a big damage multiplier. We can cast our Hunter all the time. It basically resets itself once we kill enemies, or it resets with our Prodigy's Tempo key passive. And just very strong. And then we have 3 points in Spiritual Attunement, also increasing our maximum vigor by up to 30. And this is a multiplier with our Kepaleke. So we want to have, right now I have 227 vigor. It's basically another multiplier here. 30 resources, very good. And then Supremacy, also one of the best passives in the game. We constantly cast our ultimate, so we always get the benefit. And then last but not least, we have Prodigy's Tempo here. Each third consecutive cast of the same basic skill, and Quill Volley, again, becomes the basic skill with Kepaleke. So we just cast this, and you see our cooldowns, they just keep getting reduced by 6 seconds every time. And we have maximum attack speed, so we basically have this up permanently. And it also increases all the skill ranks. Every third consecutive cast of the same score skill reduces all skills active cooldown by 10, 2% chance, and increases the skill ranks for 5 seconds. So yeah, it rocks. See, we get the skill ranks here for Armored Tide. So this is why you can theoretically get rid of these 2 points as long as you keep this buff up. However, for more quality of life, I just like to have it up all the time anyways. In the end game, you will definitely put out these 2 points and just rock rank 7. But yeah, that's the skill tree. Pretty good, very strong passive. Basically solves all our cooldown needs and gives us 2 skill ranks. Then in the Paragon board, there is a lot of synergy here as well. So in the starter board, I like to have Spirit. This is the strongest glyph, I think, on the entire Spiritborn class, giving us a crazy multiplier, even though the glyphs have basically been nerfed. Spirit here is still extremely strong. Gives us 500 crit damage. We always crit with Kepaleke. It gives us elite damage here. And yeah, just a very, very strong overall and crazy multipliers. Then the second board here, we have the Vicious Shield again with the Bulwark. We get the max barrier. Oh, and I forgot we're using Tam and Om. Here, the Warcry got nerfed a bit, but it's still giving us 15% increased damage multiplier. And we're also using this. But yeah, to get the barrier, again, we're using the Bulwark from the Druid. So we just have a bunch of barrier here. You can see 7,000 barrier once we trigger it. Basically allowing us to benefit from Vicious Shield like completely. And there's also some very strong passives here giving you damage reduction and a lot. Like we get 3%, we get 3%, 3%, plus 12%. We're basically getting 21% damage reduction while we have a barrier. And this is very, very strong. And then we're rocking Kenny here. This is increasing our non-physical damage, also giving us a multiplier. It's also very good to max out convergence. We'll talk about that in a second. So Kenny, very strong. And then I also like to have barrier generation. You basically want to have as close to 100% of your life in barrier as you have. I think I have like 97% barrier of my life at the moment. So that's very good. And then yeah, here another strong multiplier, convergence. We just need a bunch of non-physical damage, similar to Frigid Fate on the Sorc, and we get this with Elementalist, Runius, and also with Kenny itself, which giving us non-physical damage. Again, our Quill Volley is an Eagle skill, which deals lightning damage. So yeah, non-physical damage is going to boost our main attacks as well. And then we are rocking the Tailing Glyph here. This one gives us multiplicative damage with Eagle skills, 1.15x, also increasing lightning damage, which is our main damage. So that's very strong. Yeah, all my glyphs are level 100 here, rocking like crazy. Then we have Zapping here as the second to last board. This one gives us even more spirit, and we constantly cast this, and also get a 1.3x multiplier. And then here, very important, Revenge Glyph. This is also extremely strong. You might say, but Rob, you're not a Thorns build. But we actually have the Gorilla Spiritor, which allows all our attacks, all our Gorilla skills to deal Thorns damage to enemies. And you know, our Quill Volley gets to become a Gorilla skill. So we deal Thorns damage all the time, and we get barrier on top of this. And we can benefit from the Revenge Glyph because we are stacking this instantly. And the Revenge Glyph has 218% bonus to all rare nodes. And there's Eager Prey here, basically increasing our maximum resources. And we are multiplying this, so we get a ton of max resources from this glyph here, making it extremely strong. We also get a bunch of additive damage, but the resource is really where it's at, and that's mainly the reason why I use Revenge. Also 1.15x multiplier, extremely strong. And then last but not least, we have the Revealing board. We already talked about this, knock down enemies, and another 1.3x multiplier to crowd controlled enemies, which are knocked down or staggered bosses, basically very strong. And we have this here with the Colossal Glyph, giving us multiplicative damage for every stack of Resolve that we have. And we have this cool tempering here, max Resolve stacks. You can stack this even more if you like. And you can see here we have 12 Resolve stacks. So this glyph gives us a 24x multiplier. And we could have, you know, another tempering here on the amulet for it to go up to 16 Resolve and 32% X multiplier. It's going to be very close between armor and max Resolve stacks. Maybe if you have perfect armor, you go, if you have a greater affix triple crit, you can go Resolve stacks at the very, very end game. However, for me, I think armor was a little bit better at the moment. So yeah, but yeah, Colossal is an insane glyph and gives you a tremendous amount of damage as well. And yeah, that's pretty much the build, guys. I'm going to leave you here with some more crazy gameplay. You can see this build just speed farms it all, very comfortable, rocking a lot. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you enjoyed the overview. If there's more questions, make sure to leave them in the comments below. I might make a follow-up video or an FHQ video because the Spiritborn is still, you know, a very new class for players. Like there's a lot of mechanics that aren't really so explored. But I think what basically happens on most Spiritborn builds, you want to have a solution to get a permanent Resolve up. You want to have a solution to have a permanent Ferocity stacks. In a lot of builds, you want to have Barrier as well. You want to solve your resources. You want to solve your Vulnerable. You want to solve your crit. You want to solve your cooldowns, just like many of the other existing characters in Diablo 4. And I think Spiritborn is very uniquely designed where you can basically combine everything with everything. So it gets pretty crazy and it can get pretty wild in terms of, you know, possible combinations you can do. I also really like that we are playing like the, let's say the Druid Bulwark rune here, like, you know, further boosting our barrier and these kind of like off meta or off class synergies here that work really well. So I really like the creative room that is basically coming here by nerfing the Petrify and nerfing the Warcry wounds, like not being like, you know, the obvious best choice. And you can see here like Pit 100 is no joke, guys, and I only played this class, I mean, I played this class for about 100 hours to get to this point. Was probably like 80 hours, and then I was mainly testing, and I also had to farm Renown and stuff, so there was definitely a lot of things that I tested and a lot of different builds. I also played some Barb, So that's also have to be subtracted in those 100 hours. And I think if you are blasting and you're following my guide, you don't have to like figure this all out. Like we already know all this now. So I think you can reach the state like in roughly like 50 hours. And I frankly haven't really seen like, you know, many of the other classes rocking that strong. Certainly Barbarian, when I played it, felt a lot weaker than the Spiritborn. But again, the developers also acknowledge that Barbarian is, you know, pretty much on the weakest point. And you can see here how the boss is melting whenever he's staggered and he's injured. And with that, like we basically do a 3.5 minute speed run in the new Pit 100, and you'll see how hard it is when you actually play the game on another build than this. Like this build is amazing. You can play it for leveling, you can play it for everything. I hope you enjoyed the overview, my friends. I'll see you soon. There's a lot more build guides coming. I have actually another build that is probably stronger than this build even, but it's not as good quality of life, so it's only recommended for the really end game, while this build can be played in leveling and it can be played like, you know, for a more casual audience. And I think it's just overall the best build. There is one build that does more DPS than this one, and I'll cover this here the next days. It's gonna hit for let's say I hit for more than 15 billion per hit. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you soon, my friends. Take care. GG. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe, leave a like or a comment. I'm also live on Twitch almost every day, so come and say hi.